Good evening. Welcome to the Wednesday, November 4th meeting of the Moscow Planning and Zoning Commission. I'd like to call the meeting to order and begin with approval of the minutes from our October 14th, 2020 meeting. Are there any additions, corrections, deletions on the minutes? None out on Zoom land there? No? We have, hi, Rob and Joel are joining us by Zoom. Okay, with that then, can I ask for?
Joel moved for approval.
Oh, I couldn't hear him. Yeah, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Dennis. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Did I see a hand go up? No, that was it was a delay in the screen, Joel, so since you made the motion. Okay, moving on to item 2. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the commission regarding matters that are not currently before us or on our agenda. And we have one person in the audience, or would you like to speak about something?
I do have a question for you all.
Okay, so
My name is Sarah.
we need you to come to the podium and introduce yourself. Yes, thank you.
All right, so my name is Sarah von Borstel. I am a landscape architecture student at the University of Idaho. And for my studio project this semester, our site of focus is within the city of Moscow. And I chose to focus on traffic calming methods as well as a wyscaping plan for residential zones that could be implemented at different sites as the city grows. So my question for you all is, where you think this growth will happen within the city. If you think it'll start spreading outwards, or if it'll become more dense and that growth will stay within, closer into city limits and potentially closer to campus.
We have a couple of developments on the books. There's a new development right near, on 6th Street, kind of near Patty's Kitchen in that quarter, the old railroad quarter. We have Legacy Crossing, which has had various plans, but Mike Ray could probably address that one the best. Do you think you could?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, definitely our goal is to promote infill development. We have the traditional Legacy Crossing, like Wendy mentioned, between the university and downtown, and that's been kind of slow to redevelop there, but that was historically an agricultural corridor, and it's slowly transitioning to more urban uses, and so we've got some design guidelines and an overlay zone in order to facilitate that. But yeah, as far as, mainly residential subdivision growth, we can't do much on the western border because that's with Washington. To the south and portions of the north are University of Idaho. And then, a lot of the growth is going to be directed to the south and to the east and to the northeast, kind of those areas.
So there is kind of this pattern of development to the east of Mountain View over the last 30 years that's brought a lot of traffic from all that development through the historic grid and gridded streets of town. So I live in that area, and I guess I would say that might be a candidate, quite a few of those streets for traffic calming. I mean, 3rd Street has it to some degree, I guess, and 6th Street has it to some degree, but that street system within the grid, to me, seems like an opportunity to maybe look at what could be accomplished there. I don't know. And Mike, you might have other suggestions, or others of you. But
I think you could say that we're at 6s and 7s as growth is concerned, because one of the reasons that many people move to Idaho is to get away from dense urban development. And so people love to live out on Moscow Mountain or find acreage out. So you have that side of the people. On the other hand, the university, a lot of the growth is going to depend on how successful the University of Idaho is. If the university continues a kind of a slide and does not grow, it'll probably say something about the development of downtown, of the inner city. If the university, under their new president, if it grows in a perhaps even faster than the city could grow, then there's a chance, I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's an area, and Michael can tell you all about it, but a thing called Legacy Crossing. And that's a area that if the university, our problem about urban growth is that we don't have many rich people here. The new building that we're a UC building with EMSI is a unique thing, and somebody has deep pockets that are building that building, and I suspect it isn't EMSI, but so that's the first really 4-story building ever built in Moscow. So that's a signal that there is going to be some urban density. And the Legacy Crossing area is about 20 acres. And if the university grows, that'll be a great place for them to grow. And we could develop a really interesting, dense center of Moscow. But, excuse me, but a lot will depend on how the university, and I don't think any of us can predict that. You know, I think you see both sides, both the spreading and the density. People who come here to be university professors often wouldn't mind living closer to the university. The idea of having a little denser, because many people come here from larger cities, and then the question is always, do they want to get away from the city or do they miss it? Anyway, that's it's a most intriguing discussion, and one that I don't think we know the answer to, but we're right on the verge of not being a village and actually being a town. We've essentially been a village most of these years. That's my speech. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Well,
All right. Thank you all very much. That will help me a lot in my project.
okay, great. All right, moving on to item 3, approval of reasoned statement of relevant criteria and standards for a proposal for a comprehensive plan, land use designation, and zoning designation for an approximately 150-acre property proposed to be annexed into the city of Moscow and located directly west of Highway 95 and south of the current city limits boundary. And so, Mike Gray, are you going to go ahead and give us a 2-part, I guess, presentation on that, or?
Yeah, just gonna, they're attached to your packet. This just pertains to the public hearing the commission conducted at the last meeting regarding the Schweitzer proposed annexation. And so the commission was charged with providing a recommendation on the comp plan designation as well as the zoning designation upon annexation. And so those are the two relevant criteria and standards documents that reflect those two actions. So, yeah, they're attached to your packet, and I can certainly answer any questions that you have about them.
Does anyone have any questions for Mike about the relevant criteria and standards? And to me, they seem very clear and pretty much pertinent to the discussion we had about the development at the last meeting. I don't know.
And just as an aside, I'm going to skew away from answering, from saying, I think this is just fine, but this 150-acre development, if Schweitzer Engineering kicks into high gear, it could really change the nature of downtown Moscow. It could really add to that urban quality. It could be a pretty significant. It just depends on how, once again, how Schweitzer grows. Excuse me, but I'm a pro. It looks like a good a good reasoned statement, Michael. Thank you.
Okay, if we're all in agreement, they're on Zoom, we're in agreement also?
I would,
Yes,
yeah, I would
okay.
move to approve.
Rob, you move to approve?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? And you're approving both, okay, yes, go ahead. And is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Did you need us to break it into two motions, or we're okay
Do
to
one
fold them
for
into one?
both,
Okay.
yeah.
So all in favor of approving the reasoned statement of relevant criteria and standards, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. Those were very nicely prepared. So then, item 4 is a review of the draft sign code that we've been working on for a while, and Mike continues to move it forward, and it relates to a Supreme Court case that really talked about when municipalities can impose content-based restrictions on signage, and so this is our opportunity to go through several drafts, and we must be on draft 4 or 5 at this point, I don't know. Anyway.
So I'll just go through the changes that we made last time, or the ones that we discussed. Much of the draft is the same, and the commission just reviewed a few and made a couple of recommendations for some minor changes to that ordinance. The first one kind of comes back to our question of signs that aren't visible, like in a backyard, whether or not those count as temporary signs. So I think we talked about it the last couple meetings, but I went back into, so this is going to be the exemption section. So signs that are exempt from essentially getting a permit. And then we added non-visible signs to that to try to capture the signs that were not visible, like in the backyard scenario. So it reads, non-visible signs, signs to which are not visible beyond the boundaries of the lot or parcel upon which they're located, or from any public right-of-way. So tried to capture what the commission was discussing in that regard. And that was similar. There was, I think, maybe City of Spokane and a couple other municipalities had some similar language in their ordinances for the non-visible sign section. So that's an addition. And then looking at the temporary sign section and the residential zoning districts, I believe the change that we made, so this was the old language, we ended up, the commission wanted to increase the maximum number of signs permitted year-round on individual lots within the city from recommendation of 2 to 3. So we added that, made that change, and that's on subsection B here. And then one clarification, I believe, in subsection D, about the one consecutive period. So it previously read just displayed for a consecutive period, and just added one in there for clarification, and that was just relating back to our discussion last time. And then the commercial zoning districts for temporary signs, I believe the only change here was just similar to the residential zoning districts, was just to add the one temporary sign, a consecutive period. So that's what we had before. So it'd be one consecutive period. So just essentially copying the language that we had in the residential, mirroring that. And then this pertains to our discussion on institutional uses in residential, primarily residential zones, and just the desire for a lot of the larger institutional uses, kind of pointing to maybe the Nazarene Church and some of the larger church buildings and other institutional use buildings that take up a lot larger of a parcel within the city, and allowing for an increase in freestanding signage. So right now in most of the residential zones for a freestanding sign, maximum square footage is going to be 20 square feet. Bumps up to 32 with R4. And then the commercial zones, so looking at maybe residential office and neighborhood business, which are usually located in residential areas. Those are 32 as well. Looking at adding a footnote here to say that institutional uses are permitted to have 32 square feet of size and up to 48 square feet through the approval of a conditional use permit. And so we've, put the footnote here, number 7, as well as in the residential zones, just to reference that and give that exception. And I think that was the bulk of the changes that we had last time.
Okay, so anybody have any questions for Mike on this? Is everybody feeling comfortable with the changes?
It sounds like what we discussed.
Okay.
So it's currently in our, city attorney's reviewing it for compliance with the Supreme Court case. And so I'd imagine that'll take until, potentially our next meeting in December. And then we're going to go ahead and send this to probably the Board of Realtors to have them take a look at since a lot of the real estate temporary signs pertain to real estate signs.
Right.
And so we'll do a little bit of outreach there and see if we get some feedback on that, and then bring it back in December with probably a city attorney's opinion if we need to change anything, and then maybe some other stakeholder input. So.
Okay. Yeah, because that will be our next meeting, right?
That'll be our next meeting, yeah.
Because we have Thanksgiving,
shifted,
so right, so.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we'll just look forward to seeing that, and then you probably have to do a public hearing in January sometime, or maybe?
Sounds about right,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
We'll have to cancel the second meeting in December because that'll fall on the week of
Right,
Christmas.
right.
And so, it'll likely be January by the time we'll have a public hearing.
All right,
Been a long journey. You did well, Mike. Took us through a lot of stuff.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's reading pretty well now. All right, item 5 is a Transportation Commission meeting report from Joel. Do you have anything to report to us in that regard?
This will be a short report. I reported on the last meeting of the Transportation Committee at our recent past P&Z meeting. The next transportation meeting is scheduled for a week from this coming Thursday, and I have not yet seen an agenda for that.
Okay.
So, end of report.
So, anybody else have any pertinent information on Okay. So, item 6 is announcements. Does anyone have any announcements other than we won't be meeting again until the first second Wednesday in December? And that is one change.
Wendy?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, Rob.
It's not an announcement, but I'm trying to understand the dynamic of council's decision to go through first, second, and third reading on the small wireless facilities. And I'm trying to anticipate what might be coming back to us if it's not approved at the next council meeting. I wonder if Mike or is Sandy there?
Sandra, yeah, she is, yeah.
I wonder if we could kind of hear back on what's happening with that.
Okay, I'll defer to both of you to respond to that, because that's a good question. I was wondering myself, so.
Want to thumb wrestle for it?
Want to take it? I think the council just thought there's quite a bit of discussion at the council level about additions to the ordinance that could be made. Quite a bit of questions, a lot of public input as well as what the Planning and Zoning Commission has received on kind of environmental health effects. And so they're kind of grappling with that and trying to, obviously we can't regulate 5G and small wireless facilities based upon health effects. And it was kind of just walking through a lot of that at the council level and walking through things that we can regulate, and primarily aesthetic issues. And actually, I think the recommendation, or quite a bit of discussion at the last meeting, was pertaining to just the testing of, whenever you submit a permit and then potentially reserving the right in the future to perform radio frequency emissions testing. So that kind of speaks to the addition that the commission recommended when we conducted
Right.
the public hearing, to add that language and strengthen that section about a radio frequency engineer conducting an analysis and the city reserving the right to require, maybe potentially require that, not just on the onset of the application, but anywhere,
Yeah.
after that. And so it was, taking a look at that section and adding a little bit of language to that as well, just with adding the kind of the ability to potentially do annual inspections.
And this we already did, right? So are they asking for more clarification there? Or
It was just a discussion about,
Okay.
I think at the last meeting, there was quite a bit of discussion as to site preferences. When we were going over the Mill Valley ordinance, in their ordinance, they actually have preferences that the council implemented in the code, which states that, as far as location, these are the areas that the council would prefer to have small wireless facilities located, and it ranged from, the highest preference was going to be commercial, second was going to be public rights-of-way in commercial districts, third would be public rights-of-way in residential zoning districts, and then the fourth preference would be residential zones, period. And then there's a kind of just the type of facility preference. So roof mounted or building mounted. So there was a hierarchy there as far as preference to what classification of facility they would prefer to have these located in. And so that was the discussion. Our city attorney didn't think that it was, we could run into legal trouble if we actually put that in our ordinance to have that hierarchy of preferences. And so it was shifted to kind of one counselor recommending that it be in the whereas statements, the recitations at the beginning of the ordinance, which don't show up in the actual code itself. It just goes through the recitations at the very beginning. And so there's quite a bit of discussion over that. And I think that the council was, slightly divided as to whether or not those whereas statements should be included or not. And actually, it was a 4-3 vote. The mayor broke the 3-3 tie to approve the ordinance. But in order to waive the third reading, they have to have a supermajority. So the ordinance actually was essentially approved, but because they didn't have a supermajority vote to approve it, then we have to go back for a third reading before the council. So.
Okay, so potential outcomes of a third reading. So one would be that it just gets approved on the third reading outright, or does it, in follow-up to Rob's question, or would it potentially come back to us for response and revision?
Yeah, I mean, it's usually the same actions. They could approve with modifications. They could deny the ordinance, reject it.
Right. But if they
or-
approve with modifications, are the modifications being made by council or by us?
By
Yes.
council.
By council,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so of course, I'm always at those meetings, sitting in the audience. And I think they're going through the same process we've gone through. The same, it's like, well, what can we do? And can we do a little tweak? Can we do a little of this? Because when you state preferences, you have no teeth. You're just stating preference. It offers some historic perspective for future councils, looking back at it at some future date where we kind of were thinking. But some counselors felt it was just kind of cluttering things up because it didn't really do anything, and some counselors kind of felt like they wanted that suggestion there, that, but they're going through the same process we've gone through, where you're trying to find where you could put something in and finding you
Right.
can't put anything in.
Right.
So I wouldn't think it's coming back to us. I think council will make their decision. And
Yeah, I mean, it's just, as you know, it's just a complex topic with a bunch of different layers of regulations and restrictions, and the federal government, ties our hands to a certain extent on implementing some regulations. And so, the commission was probably well over a year going through and discussing, and going through all the public comment and all these, legal questions. And I think that, we really needed that year to go through and understand it and really create the ordinance. And then, it's trying to consolidate the last year into one meeting. And that's why it's been,
That's why it's three.
3 readings, is just to try to absorb all the information that is out there and try to get the best ordinance that we can that fits Moscow. So.
Well, I think adding the health testing periodically is, to me, was, or the testing periodically and at the whim, in a sense, of the city to spot check it, to me, is one of the more powerful things that we added in recent, towards the end of development. Yeah.
And just to add to that, I think you all would be, at least I hope you would, appreciate the thoughtfulness that has gone into it, because I know when I first, it's almost a year when I came to my first planning and zoning meeting and this came up, I was like, holy cow, what is this? I knew a little bit, right? So I went home and I looked up some stuff and I studied stuff and I, did some research, felt a lot more at ease the next time I came to my next planning and zoning meeting, and I felt like I knew what y'all were talking about. But the other counselors didn't have that opportunity, right? So that's the same spot they were in, and they just had some concerns. We did get a lot of questions, as you all did as well, right?
Yeah.
But, trying to go through that, and so I think you would like it, even though it's unusual that they're doing a third reading. The first time through, there was a few that were like just uncomfortable, saying, I really wish I had a little more time. We're like, well, we can do that. We'll just go to a second reading, you know? And then some more things came up and some more questions and trying to fix and finagle, and
Right, okay.
I think we're on the right track, and I think we're going to get there, and I think it's the same thing y'all went through, which really made me happy, because there wasn't anything new or crazy that came up, right? So even though you were like, why don't you trust us, we do, right? And we value all that went into it, they wanted to dig in a little more, and you should be happy about that.
No,
So,
there's a lot of
Yeah.
public interest in it, and so it's understandable that you'd want to have a more thoughtful process of
But
revisiting.
it's odd, so Rob, I
Yeah.
appreciate you asking that, because you don't often go to a third reading, or,
Yeah, it's the first
Yeah,
time
it-
I've heard of 3 readings coming through.
It was
anything that
unique
we've
in
done,
our
so-
experience, but
Yeah.
I also just want to say how much I appreciate the immense amount of work that Mike has put into to doing this. And Sandra, thank you. That was a really valuable comment that you made. So I'm pleased that we're moving on here. But again, thanks to Mike for a tremendous amount of work.
Absolutely, yes. As always, we are very lucky to have Mike. Okay, well, we were in the arena of announcements. Are there any other announcements or items of discussion? Well, it's almost the shortest meeting in a while, and thank you for coming. I guess meeting adjourned.
Okay.